It was still awesome to be in San Francisco. I mean, you go downstairs. If you don't feel like going out, just walk around the block because it's so exciting. And that's when I actually got a taste for loving theater. There used to be a columnist in the Chronicle named Herb Cain, and he would always write about the great restaurants, the happenings in San Francisco. And my best friend was living in the studio next door, and we would pick out of his column what to go see. So we started to go see theater and made a commitment to at least once a month go see some live event.
That was Susi Damilano, one of the co-founders of San Francisco Playhouse. I'm Jeff, and this is Storied San Francisco, a podcast all about the artists, activists, and small businesses that make this city unique. Susi and her husband, Bill English, check all the boxes of the kinds of people we want to highlight on this show. I sat down to record with them in their office at San Francisco Playhouse, located on Polk Street near Union Square, back in early November. As I was setting up, the theater dog, Emmy, approached me. A yellow lab whose eyes almost prevented me from carrying on with our recording that day. Emmy is short for empathy, which, as we'll hear in part 2 this Thursday, is a huge part of the mission of SF Playhouse. Here's Susi, followed by her husband, Bill.
I am from the South Bay. I grew up down there. I was originally born in Germany. My mom's German. My whole family's German, but she moved over here with some sisters when I was little.
I ask where in Germany?
Heidelberg.
Oh, I know Heidelberg. I haven't been. I spent some time in Wiesbaden.
Oh, Wiesbaden. My grandmother was born there.
Another U.S. military city.
Yeah.
Presence.
Yeah.
Place like Heidelberg.
Yeah, Heidelberg had a base across the street from where we lived.
Okay.
And many of my aunties married American servicemen because they had 7 sisters.
Oh.
And all of them are very attractive. So
wow,
that's how we all ended up coming to America, because with the exception of my mom, she was with a German.
Okay.
But anyway, so we grew up down in Silicon Valley before it was Silicon Valley. It was full of orchards and flowers. And I cut through an orchard to get to school.
Nice.
And
they have seasons down there, right? Unlike us.
Unlike San Francisco?
Warm. It gets warm.
Oh, it gets way warmer down there.
And a little colder in the winter? No.
It gets frosty, but I think in the 70s it snowed.
Yeah, right.
And I think it snowed here. I mean, I wish it would snow again. I think I was I'm not going to say what grade I was in, but I remember it snowing and thinking, that's pretty cool if it snows every 10 years, whatever.
Something.
How amazing would it be to be in San Francisco with some snow?
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So you cut through an orchard, you said, to get to school.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
yeah. Now it's housing.
Fun. Right.
But
right.
That's how the Silicon Valley started. It was orchards, apricots, cherries, all of that. It's just always been a fertile valley, and everything that's been there, even if it stops being the hot thing, some other hot thing comes in, as we've seen through the years. Me being one. No, just kidding.
Sure.
I have to throw that in there. But okay, so I was raised there, and not at all a theater or arts kid. Can
we kind of place at least a decade of some of your main growing up years?
Yeah. I'm probably a product. I graduated high school at the end of the 70s.
Okay.
And yeah.
So you did some growing up toward the end of the 70s, maybe early 80s kind of thing?
Yeah.
Young adult?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Young adult in the 70s and 80s.
And the thing I'm always curious about with folks who grew up in the Bay Area and then ended up in San Francisco, like as a kid, as a teenager, as a young adult, did you come to San Francisco? What did you think of that place up there?
San Francisco for me was always a dream of going to the big city.
Okay.
And I would listen to stories from my parents of like racing down the hills, or being escorted home by policemen.
Oh, yes.
back then the police apparently were not pulling you over for DUIs. They were helping you get home.
Oh, benevolent.
But I mean, it's back in the Frank Sinatra days that my parents were growing up, where it was cool to smoke, cool to have martinis, and all of that stuff. But so all the stories of San Francisco were always very exciting.
Yeah.
And in high school, a girlfriend and she had a car, so a fun night would be us driving up to San Francisco and like going to Polk Street. That used to be more the Castro area, but it would change as you went along each block of what it was, and until you were at the end of it. I can't even tell you the details, but we would start at one end and just slowly drive, and we just thought it was so fun, and we'd try to get into the restaurants and bars, but we were 16.
Too young.
So
Even then.
I had her make a bun on the top of her hair because I said, you look older, put the bun on, and then we'll go in, and you get in first, and then I'll come in. But it never worked. But
it's like your version of like hiding the person under the trench coat, right?
Exactly. Just make a bun in your hair. You look older.
Do it. Yeah. Okay, so Polk Street so this would be the early 80s.
I think it was like this late 70s.
And when was it, and what was it that told you wanted to be in San Francisco? Like, not just go up and visit.
Oh, well, I went to college in the 80s, and I went to San Diego State. Yay, Aztecs. Loved it down there because, I mean, it's San Diego, and how can you not love it?
Weather and Mexican food, right?
Yeah. Beaches, wonderful people, great, everything was great about it. And except for I was an accounting major, a business major, and the job market when I graduated in the mid 80s was not great down there.
Okay.
And so I came back home and I got a job at a CPA firm in San Jose.
Okay.
Which was amazing. It did all the startup companies, and one of them was Apple Computer.
Heard of it.
And so we were a beta site using their portable computers, which were like 2 feet by 2 feet boxes that we got to cart out to audits.
Yes.
But still, I always wished I could live in San Francisco.
Okay.
And it wasn't until I worked there for another 4 years-ish that I moved to a different CPA firm up here in the city.
Okay, so late 80s. Were you up here for the earthquake?
I was living in the marina.
Oh,
yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Did your place burn?
No.
Oh, good.
On Chestnut Street, it's built on bedrock.
Okay.
But across the street, all the way to the water,
The
it was
landfill.
wavy ground. It was very scary.
Wow.
But yeah, that was amazing.
You had a front row
Yes.
to a lot of
Yes.
like devastation.
Yes.
Yikes.
Yes.
Well, I like to end even little stories on a high note. So before we throw it over to your husband, can we hear like maybe something awesome about your move to San Francisco?
Oh, well, that was just one of the events.
I dug in on the earthquake.
Yeah.
But
it was still awesome to be in San Francisco.
Sure.
I mean, you go downstairs. If you don't feel like going out, just walk around the block because it's so exciting. And that's when I actually got a taste for loving theater. There used to be a columnist in the Chronicle named Herb Cain, and he would always write about the great restaurants, the happenings in San Francisco. And my best friend was living in the studio next door, and we would pick out of his column what to go see. So we started to go see theater and made a commitment to at least once a month go see some live event.
Awesome.
And I really enjoyed it as an audience member. Okay, so anyway, I'm working here as a CPA. Got to the point where it wasn't what I wanted to do the rest of my life. And somebody dared me to think about what's your dream? And I said, well, winning an Academy Award. And she said, wow, I didn't know that you were into acting. And I said, I'm not. I just want to wear the dress. I want to go to the event. And I thought it would be really cool. And so she said, well, why don't you take an acting class and see what you think? And she signed me up for an acting class that was as a dare that was at the back of a shoe store in Sunnyvale, California. That two guys that had just moved back from New York, they were like 20 years old, started an acting school. And I started taking the classes and loved it and never stopped.
Okay, I love that. So that gets you into actual production.
Yes.
And, being part of.
Now I'm in the acting world.
Now you're there. Bill?
I actually originated in the Midwest, suburb of Chicago, Evanston, Illinois, and also spent my high school and college years in Arizona. My dad got a college job at ASU, so we moved to Tempe. So I finished high school in Tempe and went to ASU.
Okay.
And then I actually went back to Northwestern to go to grad school in the theater.
Okay. So theater was something you've known for a while that you wanted to do.
Yeah, I'd say, when I was really young, I was an instrumentalist, played the oboe, and I'd never given theater a second thought, really. But I had to play oboe in the pit orchestra for my freshman year for our production of The Mikado. And I was just like, I describe it as being hit by lightning. There I am playing the oboe, and I was just dumbstruck. Like, I thought, what the heck am I doing down here in the pit when I could be up on stage? And the conductor I was hypnotized.
Yeah.
And it would just hit me from nowhere because I'd never thought about the theater at all.
Right.
And the conductor would literally throw his baton at me because I would miss my cues. And so the next year I tried out for the musical, which was Carousel, and I got the second lead of Mr. Snow. And the next year I played Freddie and My Fair Lady. And
did you know you
could sing? I really never looked back.
Did you know you could sing already, or?
Oh yeah, I always was a singer.
Okay.
Always was. My family, my parents are both musicians. So we grew up in music.
Right.
Music was like air. My dad was a band director, so I used to say I could play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Stars on every instrument in the orchestra because he would bring them home and show me a little bit about how to play each one. So we always sang.
Okay.
We sang in church choirs and school choirs. So I always sang. But I never really imagined myself getting the lead in a musical, but obviously I sang well enough to get those parts. So my first shows were musicals, actually. And then...
did you know right away that you liked doing it? Because that was a transition from band to, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
To stage.
I much preferred the stage.
Okay.
I was smitten. I had a great high school drama teacher who was very, very passionate about the history of theater and stuff outside of just acting, and he really just inspired a lot of us with the desire to pursue that career, even when I was 15. He was also the JV football coach and dragged me in off of the football field to be in his class.
Interesting.
He was so good that I often have said that I learned enough history of theater when I was 15 years old in high school that I never had to study again. Through undergrad and grad school.
It was just there.
I already knew all that stuff.
Right.
Because he was so good at it.
Okay.
I was making up seasons when I was, which is what an artistic director does. I was literally sitting on my floor in my bedroom with little scraps of paper constructing the seasons, the plays that would be in the season.
And at what age?
16.
Wow. Okay.
16, 17.
Okay. What brought you to San Francisco? And roughly when?
Well, as a kid, I loved San Francisco. The parents would bring us out here on a trip.
So you would visit? I
remember sitting at, what was the football field?
Kezar?
No, not Kezar.
Candlestick. Yes.
We came from Arizona, so we thought it was going to be all warm and cozy here.
Yeah.
And here we are in our tank tops and shorts, freezing our asses off.
Yep.
In Candlestick.
Yeah.
Trying to cover ourselves with newspapers and stuff. But I was really, definitely smitten by San Francisco. I came back a couple more times, saw shows. I remember seeing Cabaret at probably the Geary or the Golden Gate. And so I associated San Francisco with theater. But I didn't really pursue theater after college. I got involved in playing in rock bands and country western bands.
You mentioned you're an instrumentalist.
Toured around for a while.
Playing back then?
Piano.
Okay.
And I sort of migrated from Chicago, back to Phoenix, to L.A., making my living as a musician, moved up here, making a living as a musician, and wondering what had happened to my theater career. You know, and then somehow when we were up here, I ended up migrating back to the theater, started going on auditions, for plays.
Roughly when was this, and have you been here basically ever since?
It would have been probably like early 80s that I started, because I remember one of the things that drove me out of the music business was having a daughter be born. You know? And then you're up till 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning and never getting any sleep at all. So
that'll do it.
I said, that's it. You know, so if I wasn't working weekends, I could then try out for plays.
Right.
So I migrated back to the theater, and I've been pretty much 100% devoted to theater ever since.
Okay. Does that get us enough of you both in the theater to your meeting?
Well, yes, because I'd say a bunch of years later, in the late 90s, Susie had taken classes, and I think she was up here taking a class in San Francisco at a place called the Gene Shelton Acting School, where I had also studied, and where we had some common friends. And we met outside on the street outside of a theater, and
I'll take it from there because he likes this story.
But there is another one.
Because I knew of Bill because he and his friend Louis Parnell did a lot of small theater productions around town. They were, what you call a nomad theater company where they'd rent a space and put up a show. And I knew of them because as part of my acting class, they recommended that we went to see shows. And so I volunteered. One night, I volunteered to work the concession stand in order to get free ticket at a show that both he and Louis were in. And I remember thinking, oh, that guy's cute. But the program said he dedicated the show to someone, and I thought, oh, well, I guess he's married. But through the next several years, I would see him at parties and things like that, and he wouldn't give me the time of day. But at this one fateful night, he came to a show, and I was sitting next to one of his friends, and afterwards, the friend said, hey, Susie, you want to join us? We're going across the street for a drink. And I said, yes.
Do you remember where the drink, like where the bar was? Or?
Yes. It's, I believe it is now called the Adriatic Hotel. I think it's changed hands, right? It's across the street from the Clift-ish.
Oh, so around here-ish.
Yeah, over on Geary Street.
Okay.
On Geary, it's a big white hotel now, but I can't remember the name of what it used to be called, but it's across from the Clift.
Okay.
Anyway, so we were in there, and he was bemoaning the lack of good new scripts. And I happen to have a friend who works in LA who's also a theater person that I had done a play with, who had literally just suggested to me that she was given a script that had a perfect part for her and I, and that we should figure out a way to produce it. And so when he said, oh gosh, there's just no good scripts, I have one. And he said, sure. I've heard this before.
Ulterior motives flying back and forth across the table.
So he told me to send him the script, which I did. Now, these are the days you have to actually mail things.
Yes, I heard a comedian last night talk about stamps and like kids today are like, how much is that? $100? Because no one knows how much a stamp costs. Or how much every envelope, many stamps you need.
You had to get an envelope big enough to stick an entire printed script into, and then you don't have a cell phone either.
Correct.
So you have an answering machine at home that you go home and you check and see, did they get it? Did they respond? What are they going to do? So anyway, I mailed it to you, and I remember coming home one day and listening to the messages saying, hi, this is Bill English, and you've done an amazing thing. First of all, people say they have good scripts, but they're not really good. And this is really good. And second of all, people say they'll mail it to you, and then they never do. Would you like to get together and talk about it?
Yes. I think they call that follow through. You followed through.
Yes.
And you were delighted. Okay. And then what?
Well, it obviously turned into a first date.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit, like, where was that?
We went to, I think it's still there, Zarzuela I lived in Russian Hill, and
Okay.
Zarzuela is a tapas restaurant that I think is still there, a very popular one. And
We can fact check that.
Yeah, and I hope it lasted through the pandemic.
Right.
But so we went. He suggested that we get together and have dinner, and so we went there. And of course, I'm like, "Is this a date or is this a business meeting?" And then he said to the
Shaking his
waiter,
head.
he said, "Get us your best Spanish wine." And I'm like, "It's a date."
Yes. Okay.
He knows what I'm going to say next. And then when the bill came, we split it 50-50, and I went, "It's not a date."
Date. Oh, man. And what year was this?
We met in 97?
97.
97. Okay. And married?
We remember the date that we met,
Oh.
particularly because it was a...
Oh, when we met at the
Fateful day.
theater, it was a fateful night. It was the night that Princess Diane and
I remember
Dodie
that, yeah.
died. That was the big news that everyone was talking about.
October?
August 31st.
August. Another month that starts with a
Yeah.
vowel. Okay, August. Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah.
And then married when?
1999.
2 years later.
2 years later.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was pretty instant.
Yeah.
Once we started dating, I don't think we ever stopped.
And the play that Susie sent me ended up being kind of our courtship because we did produce it.
Yes.
So that Linda, her friend, and Louis Parnell, my best friend, the four of us created a little company and we produced the play, and at the end of it we were still talking. So I thought, this is good.
This is a thing. What was the little company called?
Oh, I think we used Louis' name. Wasn't it Genesius? Or no, we had our own name.
No,
What was it?
The Dream Stackers.
Dream Stackers, of course.
I love it. Okay, now, and so that's basically, am I wrong, part of the story of SF Playhouse?
Oh, for sure. That was the first play that we produced.
Okay. Okay.
No, yeah.
Wasn't SF Playhouse yet, but
Yeah, but
eventually
it's-
the interest we had in producing theater led us to form a company.
Like a beta version.
Yep.
As
Definitely.
they say in Silicon
definitely.
Valley. Yeah.
I mean, we never stopped producing together because we both became members of the Actors Theater Company and continued to produce there. And then at a time we were having a parting of ways with that company, we literally walked outside to the sidewalk on Sutter, and there's still a building there with a for sale sign on it with Greek pillars that had a for rent sign at the time. And I know people had been calling for years and years to get into that space, and no one ever answered the phone. But that day we looked at each other and said, let's just call and see if we can get that space. And Bill called, we got the space, and that's where we went. And we wanted to do, we had a couple plays we wanted to do, and then after we did them, someone recommended that we get a subscription, and so we asked the audience, if we do keep doing plays, would you keep coming? They said yes, and that was where San Francisco Playhouse truly was born in 2003.
That was Bill English and Susi Damilano, co-founders of San Francisco Playhouse. Please join us for part 2 this Thursday, wherever you get podcasts. Music for Storied San Francisco was produced, performed, and curated by Otis McDonald. Aaron Lim of Bitch Talk Podcast is our contributing producer. And the show is produced and hosted by me, Jeff Hunt. Now in our 6th season, we have more than 200 episodes available on our website, storiedsf.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're able to, please rate and review the show, and drop us a line at storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Keep rejecting those silly doom loop narratives about our city. Stay wacky, weird, healthy, and creative. And we'll see you next time on Storied San Francisco. We acknowledge and respect the first humans of the unceded land we call San Francisco, the Ramaytush Ohlone. We condemn the genocide of these and other tribes across the Western Hemisphere. We honor their legacy and history, and we support rematriation and sovereignty efforts.
This podcast is a proud member of the BFF.FM podcast network. Learn more at podcast.bff.fm.
BFF.FM, best frequencies forever.